Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Let's kind of talk about the quarterback scene, because the Cleveland Browns, they have Dylan, they have Shador, Deshaun Watson will be the emergency quarterback probably all year. Let's just say this is a room without a definitive answer at the quarterback position. I think that's a fair way to put it. I think that's a charitable way to put it, but it's a fair way to put it. If you're the Browns, and my big fear is the Browns are in peak, convince themselves quarterback prospect X could be, it used to be Kirk Cousins would be the explanation. Like, oh, he could be Kirk Cousins. Let's take him at 12. I think it's now he could be Bo Nix. Right? Oh. Yeah.
Or like he could be Brock Purdy.
He could be, even though I would say Brock Purdy is starting to play himself out of that.
Yeah.
I would say the last year, he's definitely like dealt with a lot of injuries on that roster where you're like, I don't know if you could just say it's just Brock being in a great situation. But yeah, I feel like Bo Nix is the guy that everybody kind of defaults to, because like we talked about it before. Perfect discourse quarterback, because you'll watch Bo Nix sometimes and you're like, might be good. You watch Bo Nix other times, you're like, worst quarterback I've seen. Like with the 12-win record, like consistently. Don't know how this works. It's certainly like better than the Jimmy Garoppolo zone, but it's not that different. And I fear that the Browns are definitely the team, if somebody's going to pull the trigger early on a quarterback that maybe shouldn't be pulled on, I think the Browns are probably the team that screams that, given that like they need to do something at the position. And it might have to be more than just Malik Willis in free agency. You know, it has to be something that they feel like is a long-term answer. So that brings me to Ty Simpson. I think if there's two quarterbacks in this class, you might be able to do that with Carson Beck, Ty Simpson, right? That feels like who's going to be the candidate for that. What do we make of Ty Simpson? Because there was a point this year where it looked like he might be in that upper tier of quarterback prospect. And then the second half of the season happened, which is like the second time this has happened to Alabama with the quarterback prospect.
So with Ty Simpson, I think a lot of it had to do with his injury. It looked like every time you watched Ty Simpson over the back half of the season, he was grabbing at something. Back or his shoulder or something that was affecting his accuracy or his arm strength. His accuracy profile dropped major in a big way over the back half of the season. You can check Corey Kinnon's work. He does a lot of QB charting, and Ty Simpson's accuracy did drop in the back half of the season. That provides a lot of cause for concern. On top of that, if we are doing like the next Bo Nix or like the next Bo Nix in this class, the worry for Ty Simpson is that he's only started 15 games in college. So Bo Nix started like 40 plus. Yes. The Bo Nix stuff only works if you've played a lot of football and have a lot of reps. Ty Simpson doesn't have a lot of reps. Although he is a son of a coach, grown up around football, maybe that provides you a little more comfort. I think the lack of reps is going to be something that definitely is going to come up. But for me, he's got sort of a slighter frame. He is really confident throwing balls over the middle. And I think his accuracy really shines in those areas when he is confident. And I think he's got a little bit of recklessness to him. Sometimes he has a little bit too much dip on his chip, but he's gutsy. He's a gamer. I think he is going to be a starting quality quarterback. Like he's not going to be like, I don't think he's ever going to be like a QB1 or like an elite or even like very good QB. I think he will be about average. He will be around the QB like 13 to 17 area.
Are you putting like Derek Carr? Not like comp wise and style wise. I'm saying like he's that level. You feel the same about having Derek Carr.
Yeah, I think like he is good enough to start games and win you games. I don't know if he is good enough to win you important games without the help of everything else around him.
Okay. Do you think that where would you value that if your team like the Browns? Now, like, because your options are not great, right? Where would you value that?
So for me, I think the middle of the first round really feels like the sweet spot for him, but because of the QB tax, he's going to end up going a lot earlier. I think around where Pittsburgh's picking, wherever Pittsburgh ends up picking, might be like where I'd feel comfortable picking Ty Simpson because of just like everybody wants a quarterback, everybody's going to go get a quarterback, and this draft class doesn't necessarily have like you're going to go get a starter in this class, like unless Trinidad Chamblas like has 2 more great games and enters the draft and can't get that extra year of eligibility, I don't know. So I think the QB tax will move him up early, but I do think like around middle to late part of the first round is where I feel comfortable.
Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today. Get up to $100 credit using the code WORSTTAKE. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
Yeah. Well, Bo Nix went 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like right around where Ty's going to go. Trade back to 12 and take Ty Simpson. It feels like a possibility, a strong possibility for the Cleveland Browns. What do you make of the injury thing, right? Because he does have a slight frame. And it's like, on one hand, you could look at it and say, hey, look, he looked like this before he got hurt. And maybe we should just evaluate what he looked like before he got hurt. Or do you have to kind of look at what he looked like when he was hurt because of his frame? He's not the biggest guy in the world, and kind of have to assume that he's going to have an injury at some point that he's going to have to play through it the season.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you're going to have to look at the injuries that he had this season. And because, again, he has a slighter frame, and he also is, I believe, I'll have to go check this just to make sure, but he's not exactly like 20 years old, like he's 23.
Yeah.
So you could make the argument that like you maybe can get a couple more years of like physical development out of Ty Simpson and his body to grow into his body. But he's closer to being maxed out than like a Dante Moore, for example. But
who's 20?
Yeah, like so you can argue that he might be a little bit physically maxed out, which is why his accuracy and his confidence over the middle of the field stands out, because his arm isn't necessarily like super great. But I do think it'll have to be taken into consideration because he's not exactly like this physically dominant player who wins with arm strength or athleticism. But he always has to put himself in the correct position with his mind, with his processing, and with being 100% healthy to maximize the arm talent that he has.
Yeah, I think he's going to be one of the players that Browns fans are going to have a lot of conversation about. You talked about another one. I have not watched a ton of him outside the broadcast. Trinidad Chamblas. What do you make of Trinidad, man? Like, how do you figure with that guy?
So I really like Trinidad Chamblas for what he is. He's a creative passer. I think he's super athletic, and he has like the gamer gene. Like he's going to go win you football games. And I think that his ability to process, I think they've done a lot more like pro style stuff at Ole Miss than last year. But again, you worry that he's small. And like how long is he going to hold up? He's like 6 feet, maybe. And with Bryce Young, like sort of, I don't want to say like crashing and burning, but I don't think you're picking Bryce Young in a redraft #1 overall. Part of his issues have been that his size. So you worry that he's not able to adjust to NFL size, NFL speed at that size that he is. I think he could potentially be like a really high quality backup. But that's why I also think he's gonna return to school, because who knows what'll happen with another year at Ole Miss.
Yeah, especially without Lane Kiffin there. which seems to have made them better. I don't know. Like, is this the ultimate like sports gods playing a trick on us, or I don't know? Because like that Lane Kiffin to LSU thing is just screams like it's going to be a mess. But we'll see what happens with that one. I don't know what to make of Lane out there in LSU. See. So if you were the Browns GM, right, JP, you get the job. You know, you're leading the Browns alongside with Andrew Berry, whatever that looks like, and you have that 6th pick there. You're looking at the roster. There's a lot to fix, right? How would you want to approach the offseason? Like, obviously, we want to address offensive line, right, with some money, wide receiver. But if you're sitting there at 6, one, if you get the opportunity to trade up, what would you be willing to give up to get to 2, to get Moore or Mendoza? And if you can't trade up, what do you feel like your best course of action would be given the circumstances of the job?
I feel like if you want to move up to 2 for Dante Moore, you'd have to give up 6. You'd have to give up the 2nd first-round pick, and I think you'd have to give up a day 2 this year or next year. I don't know if the Browns are willing to do that. I don't think so, given the amount of help that this roster still needs. I think if it were me, and we're under the assumption that you sign like you sign a couple of like free agents on the offensive line. Like, are we making the assumption they replace Teller and Bitonio with 2 guards in free agency?
I think if we're looking at the class, they're probably looking at replacing center and maybe tackle. I think they could throw a lot of money at like a Rashad Walker or something like that, or throw a lot of money at like Linderbaum.
Yeah. So if you hypothetically, if you're signing Linderbaum and then you go sign Rashad Walker, I still think you consider offensive linemen at 6 and 28. Especially like considering where you're at with this offense. I think you consider offensive line. I think you consider receiver at 6. I think that it'd be a little bit risky to bring in a quarterback at 6, especially if it's Ty Simpson, without that offensive line being 100% intact. Depending on what you do with the offensive line, it could be a little bit shaky for Simpson. But I think if you decide that you're going to go receiver at 6, maybe like Carnell Tate or something, or Jordan Tyson, if you go with either of them at 6, I think 28 is a perfect spot for like a Caleb Lomu, maybe Monroe Freeling from Georgia, who's played really well over the last stretch of the season. I think there are opportunities where like you can avoid drafting a quarterback and punt to 2027 because like worst case scenario, or best case scenario, you're awful in 2027. You get the number 1 pick and you get Arch Manning. Worst case scenario, like you have a quarterback. So maybe you go in, you sign like a vet quarterback. Maybe this is the Malik Willis destination. And you see what happens with Willis. If it doesn't work, who you're going to be picking at top of the draft again. If it does, you have a quarterback. I think they're in a good position to just keep adding to the roster outside of the quarterback spot.
What if they win like 6, 7 games, though? Because that's what they're probably in position to do without a quarterback. It's like they won 5 games this year. They got some young talent on the roster. You're probably going to get better. If you draft correctly, you're probably going to get a little bit better there. You're still going to have limitations. Defense is going to be good enough to get you about 4 or 5 wins, especially if they play as good as they did last year. And when you're like 7 games and you're picking like, 11th, 12th? That's my concern about waiting until 2027. You don't have the extra first, right, to be able to potentially move up if it is a QB heavy class. And you're going to be probably better next year. I don't see them getting worse. I don't think they can anticipate being worse because it's not like they're selling off a bunch of guys like New York did, right? Where they just have to show to get rid of Miles, to get rid of Denzel, right? That's my thing about that is like where I think the worst case scenario is that they win like 7 games. and they're not in range for quarterback. They don't have the ammo to move up, and they're also not really in a good spot to trade back and get more to maybe jump into next year's class. And then, like, how many years are you going to have before you got to do something at the position, right? Like something that's not a Band-Aid. And I think they're running out of time here to put Band-Aids on it, right? Like they tried the Band-Aid last year. Obviously, it wasn't a great attempt. It was like Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. But I don't know if Kevin's getting fired, then Andrew's probably not far away. I don't know if you can convince yourself a Band-Aid year at quarterback's going to be what makes it so that you don't lose your job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I guess the issue there is knowing the Jets also need a quarterback, or knowing the Raiders also need a quarterback. How much are you having to how much are you willing to give up to move to the top two? Are you willing to give up both first round picks? Like, again, and we're operating under the assumption you sign a center, you sign a tackle, you still got to draft guard in this class. Are you willing to take that risk? And I can see the reason why. Because if you trade up to, let's say that you trade up with the Jets, because the Jets have like 2 picks or 3 picks in 2027. They can go get a quarterback next year if they wanted to. And you draft Dante Moore, then second round, you can go and draft your guard or something, or receiver or something. I can see that also. So I think if they want to be aggressive, and knowing that Andrew Berry might be like, this might be his last draft he gets as a Browns GM, I think you sort of talked me into it. I think you've talked me into if you are willing to, I guess the way I say it is, if you have all these first round picks this year, there's no reason to stand pat. There's no reason to just sit there.
That's my thinking, is like, if you like them enough that you think the value is there with the trade up and the opportunity is there, I think you got to take the opportunity when it's presented to you, right? Like, because if you wait for 2027, there's no guarantee that you're going to have an opportunity there. And that might involve you sacrificing multiple years of draft picks, which is a situation that led you to how the roster got to the place on the offensive side of the ball today, right? So that's my thing, is like, if the opportunity is there, you kind of got to do something. Because I feel like rolling into the season, and look, no disrespect to any of the quarterbacks on the roster, but this is a get you fired quarterback roster right now. Like, there is nothing here to hold over any hope for next year. Like, I know that some people have hope for Shedeur Sanders. 5 more games like the last 4 of the season he played, it's going to be, remember Kenny Pickett got benched for Mason Rudolph?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that, right? It turns into that real quickly. So you can't really bank on that. And if you sit on your hands and quarterback's been this glaring need over the last few years, and then you have to play Deshaun Watson again, I feel like everybody gets fired again.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody knows.
Like, you can't stand pat. Like, the fact that we're even considering, like, you might have to play Deshaun again is the issue.
And I think this is ultimately why we run the risk of reaching for a quarterback the most if a trade up is not there. And I'm like, would I rather have that extra first, or would I rather just not have to reach? You know?
Like, I would much rather, like, go ahead and trade those 2 firsts.
Hey, bro, the quarterback good. You can build around that. You got time.
Like, you at least buy yourself some time.
Yeah. Like, if you go after Ty Simpson at pick 12 or something like that, or try to draft him with the Jaguars pick, and then he's like has 6 bad games, it's over for everybody, you know? And that's not the situation you want to be in. Like, Ty Simpson could be good. He's not going to be good in that situation, you know? So I think there's a lot to think about there with Cleveland and the quarterback, what this class is going to be, what the free agent options are. Also, like, would you even be willing to get, Malik Willis to want to come here just because Mo Geddes is his agent, same agent as Deshaun Watson? So maybe Mogetta tries to like not make his guy's life harder, even though I don't know what that current standing is with those two. I don't know how much he factors that in. But I imagine Mogetta's not going to recommend Cleveland when he's asked for counsel, right? This has to be something where you sell Malik Willis on this, and how much energy and work is that going to take? And is that work you're willing to do when you're also trying to see if you could trade up for a quarterback?
Yeah, I think it's a risk that you're willing to take.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, if you got to put your resources in something, you got to kick the doors on with the Jets. I worry that the risk is going to be we kick the doors with the Jets. They don't want to trade, or they kind of like play with the ideal of trading till like March, and they're like, nah, we're going to take quarterback. And then by then, Malik Willis is gone, and then maybe somebody trades for Anthony Richardson. And we're like, well, we could give Daniel Jones $20 million.
You're the last one left with nobody to dance with.
And that's kind of been the story the last few years with the Browns, is not having those pathways to be able to solve the problem, because they're waiting for too many doors to open up, and they're in a situation again where their answer requires a lot of cooperation to be able to get to. And you can't really count on that. We'll see what happens here. Just real quick, because we talked about Moore and Mendoza here. What kind of there's been a lot of talk about, I think, especially Mendoza over the last few weeks. What do you think he has been this polarizing of a number one quarterback in a draft for some people? What do you think that's about with him? Because there's so much hesitancy.
He plays at Indiana. He transferred from Cal. That's really it. I also think he doesn't really play the game with a very he's not going to do all the outside the pocket stuff. He's not going to do all the creativity. He's not a great runner. I think he can run. I don't think he's a great runner, but what Mendoza wins with is processing pre and post snap, and I think he has the arm strength to hit at every level of the field. It's very much like Jared Goff.
Mm-hmm.
And again, people are going to be like, oh, Jared Goff's not that great. Jared Goff is a good quarterback. Jared Goff's a really good quarterback. But I think that's sort of where we sort of deviate when it comes to QB analysis is, sometimes everybody's hunting for the next Drake May, and everybody's hunting for Caleb Williams, which is fine. But also you
hell
need
of a
Jared
draft
Goff.
Class. Whew. What a fantastic year to need a quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams at the top of the class. Whew. Oh, yeah. That's the closest to 2018 we're going to get in the recent.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was a hell of a year.
I mean, maybe next year with Manning and Sellers, but I don't know.
We're waiting on bodies of work there that just have not, with Williams. I don't know. I didn't follow Daniels at Arizona State, but I know with Williams specifically, it was you knew what that was. We were waiting on that after freshman year, Caleb Williams. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's going to be a number one overall pick whenever he comes out. And then with Drake May, people were on to that by his sophomore year. And then Jaden Daniels, he had the breakout year at LSU. I don't know if 2027 has anybody who you're oh no, we've been waiting on. I think DJ Lagway could have been that. Arch Manning could have been that, but there's still so many questions in the body of work with those guys. Maybe less so with Arch over the last month. But
I think if you're looking for guys next year, maybe Drew Mestemaker used to be in North Texas. Now he's at Oklahoma State. Real air raid quarterback. There are probably gonna be people who don't like him. Probably gonna be people that love him. Darian Mensah went back to school. There's gonna be a lot of talent. So if you want to punt on this year's class, you could, but we also said the same thing about this year's class.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well go get your guy now.
Yeah, I think that's really where I land at with this conversation.